Hello, and welcome to the Let's Talk Transformation podcasts. Today, we're going to talk about the nervous system and the invisible rules we inherited about success and what that means for our leadership. I'm delighted to welcome today's guest, Dr. Melanie Gray, a trauma-informed leadership and wellness strategist. Melanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Susie, so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yes,
Um,
I am as well.
Melanie, you hold a PhD in nursing and you have more than 20 years experience in healthcare and higher education. And you specialize in helping high achieving professionals, particularly women in healthcare and leadership, to recover from burnout and rebuild confidence, but through regulating their nervous system and other approaches. But your work bridges healthcare leadership, trauma-informed practice, and burnout recovery. So today we're going to unpack why so many high performers are silently running on empty, and whether you listening are currently experiencing burnout, trying to create the conditions for your teams and peers to anticipate burnout and therefore prevent chronic stress. This is for you. So, Melanie, let's start here then. When did we start normalizing exhaustion as excellence?
Well, I believe that we started normalizing it over the last 25 years when we had access to the internet
Mm,
and the stories of other people. Prior to the internet, people got their cues on life from their community, and they only had, an additional 100 people that were embedded in their life and their lifestyle over the course of a lifetime. Your community was your benchmark,
mm.
and people lived community together. And now, since the internet, we are benchmarking with people across the world, people whose lives are true, people whose lives are not.
Mm,
And then as women, we have come through, women's suffrage, and we now want to have it all because we've been told that we can, and that isn't true either.
mm,
So there's a greater striving for things, for benchmarking our lives against people we don't even know, and it causes this stress. We
mm.
now believe that we should have it all. We don't always know what all is, and we're going for it anyway.
Yeah, and we have to pretend, I'm going to use that word, pretend that we have these brilliant lives that we put all over social media, LinkedIn included.
Mhm.
And I see, in tech, founders equating their own self-worth with funding rounds. In healthcare, we saw that in COVID and it continues. Compassion
Mhm.
fatigue is also normalized. In education, emotional labor is visible. Now it used to
Well,
be invisible.
and people now are telling their stories too.
Yeah.
I think the other piece of it around burnout and stress is when our communities were smaller, family business was family business, and
Yeah.
we didn't have the freedom to talk about challenges, but now we're talking about it. But there's
Mm,
also a greater need for more. I mean, there are things that existed when I now that you have to support, like
mm,
internet and cable and uh multiple TVs and Wi-Fi. And so there are bills,
mm.
and things that we need in life that didn't exist. And all of this, I think, puts a strain on what we need or what we believe that we need. And we're not pausing to get to know ourselves and set our own definition of
Mm,
character
mm,
and value.
mm. And I think it's interesting, Melanie, before the show, you were saying that burnout isn't just, in inverted commas, overwork. It's nervous system overload. Can you break that down for us a little bit?
Yes, burnout. So your body is meant to rest. You have your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system. God created that for a reason
Mm.
because one keeps you going for fight or flight.
Hmm.
Sympathetic, your parasympathetic gets you to rest. We are created to rest.
Mm.
Your body sleeps to rejuvenate itself.
Mm. Or
It's
doesn't.
not, we don't have to
Mm.
avoid it. It's not a
Mm.
sign of weakness to need stress, to need sleep. But when we're always on, the light never goes off.
Mm.
And then we are always on fire We
Mm.
never rest, and that is burning out.
Mm.
And their old saying is you cannot burn a candle at both
But
ends,
then,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, I think this always on and not needing sleep and being able to do things without rest is glorified, isn't it? This
It's
busyness,
very much
this, yeah,
glorified.
yeah,
Have you, I'm sure, Susie, you've been in conversations where someone will say, "Oh, I'm tired. I've been
yeah,
working 45 hours." And someone else will say, "Oh, no, you can't be that tired because I did 55." And it
yeah.
becomes this well, you can't possibly understand because you're not taking care of your mother, your
Mm,
father, your sister, your brother, your job. And then it
mm,
goes on, and we have normalize fatigue, normalize busyness as a
mm.
badge of honor. And busyness does not mean effectiveness.
Yeah, I know.
Busyness does
Mm,
not mean productivity.
mm,
And we over define who we are as individuals, our gifts and talents, simply by what we do for work
totally.
and what title we have
And
for work.
it
And
becomes your self-identity.
it becomes your whole identity.
Mm,
And it's something when you do that, that means your identity can be taken away from you. And so
yeah.
I really believe that people have to embrace themselves, their gifts, and their talents, and build a whole life and see yourself as a whole person so
Mm,
that when things happen in your job or your role, you're still left standing.
mm. So essentially, because often in corporate world, performance equals identity. I am my results, and the standard answer to how are you? It's oh busy. But so what if your burnout isn't a productivity problem, but an actual identity problem? And what if the reason you can't switch off is not ambition, but conditioning? Where would you start, Melanie, with advising leaders that are listening, thinking, that sounds like me?
Well, I think they have to pause and stop. And in some cases, you might have to stop
Mm,
and get some, well, stop and have some reflection.
mm,
And in that reflection, you might need to get some clinical help
mm,
because from a trauma-informed leadership perspective, it's really helping leaders and individuals understand what in my upbringing, what happened to me,
mm,
what has happened in my life, what conditioning did I get from my parents that has resulted in some of my behavior. So
mm,
if your parents only validated hard work and good grades, potentially you feel like you have to be an overachiever in order to be validated.
mm, mm,
If uh if no one ever really in your upbringing acknowledged you and up. I had a student once tell me that I was the most family he ever had, that no one ever told him he could do anything
mm,
until he had me as a teacher. And that always stuck with me. And actually, Susie, he stayed with me for 15 years. I mean, he took me out to lunch last week because I'm
nice.
that person, right?
Of
And now
course.
he's getting ready to buy a home and these kind of things. But so if you've never had that, that can impact who you are and how you show up. So some things are deeply rooted and
Mm,
you might need clinical help to get that. But sometimes it's just a matter of you sitting down with
mm,
yourself and having an honest conversation about your priorities and stop buying the lie that you have it all. No one has it all. It's just
mm.
what do you want to define as value for yourself?
Yeah, and it depends what all means. Like you say, it depends on your definition of all. And, it is about the stories we tell ourselves, of course, which have come from childhood often. But, if burnout had a voice, what lie do you think it would whisper most often to high achievers? What do you think is the most prominent story that keeps them going?
The story that keeps you going is this is what it takes.
Mm,
That you need to be tired. It's okay. And you can't do anything about it if you're going to be successful.
mm,
And I think burnout is a lie. You can absolutely avoid it. You absolutely have a choice. Burnout is a choice.
mm. mm,
You have to make different choices, set different boundaries, and validate yourself and be okay with it.
mm.
There are secondary gains we get from being exhausted. There are sometimes as leaders, we like having that super syndrome S on our chest.
Yes.
You're the one that's gonna get it done, Susie. Go to Susie. She'll follow through. She'll make it happen. And you think, oh wow, that's me.
Yeah, makes
You
me feel
like the
important.
identity.
Yeah,
Yeah, you love that, right?
yeah, yeah.
Until you fall. And the thing is, in terms of organizations, my observation has been more often than not, they applaud you until you're not, until
Yes,
you can't.
yeah.
And then they say, "Ooh, okay, next.
Mm, mm,
Who's next? Who's gonna
yeah.
fill that role?"
And
You know,
that's disappointing for the person who's thinking that, you know, people have her back or his back because of what they deliver.
no. And more often, in my observation, is you might get a plant from the grocery store, maybe, but they move on.
Mm,
They move on
mm,
very quickly.
mm. And it's interesting because you talk about leaders carrying backpacks, and I also love this analogy of, you know, hiking up this hill with a backpack, and in it I have everything I need, and some things I maybe no longer need. So, what would be in a leader's backpack if they are equipping themselves not to burn out, Melanie?
Well, on a daily basis, you have a calendar. The
Hmm.
first thing I say is you need a calendar in your backpack, and in that calendar should be your name every
Hmm.
day.
Hmm.
The time that you're spending to go for a walk, read a book, to make a new friend, find a new hobby, spend time with your family, your children, your mom. You'd have yourself and your values in your calendar
Hmm.
because I believe that you work to live, you don't live to work. And if you don't see life in your calendar,
Hmm.
life in your ongoing plan, that is something to consider. I think after your calendar, then you need an alarm clock so that you go to sleep. You set time to do some things like sleep.
Hmm. Hmm.
You need good nutrition. You need a water bottle so that
Hmm.
you stay hydrated. And you would need to put in your backpack some on the calendar some scheduled vacations, some time
Hmm.
away.
Mm. And what if I'm telling myself, which I think a lot of us are, that I'm building my resilience by doing that? I'm pushing forward, I'm pushing forward, I'm pushing through, and therefore that's building resilience. What would your advice be there, Melanie?
Well, I would say pushing is the operative word. That's probably not a good plan.
Yeah.
You can't force a round peg in a square hole or
Mm,
vice versa, right?
mm,
Um, so you're already resilient. Resilience means that you can bounce back.
mm,
But if you're burned out, you don't bounce, right? Things that are disintegrating don't necessarily have a bounce back.
mm,
They disintegrate.
mm,
And so you're telling yourself a lie and you're not being true or untruth. You're not being true to yourself. You're
mm,
not being true to your value. And you already have proven your resilience. If you have gone to school, if you have applied for a job, if you've gone through any of life's adversities,
mm,
even having a child, getting your
mm,
child to fifth to K5, you've been
mm,
resilient, right? You've
mm,
had periods of things where you had to do things and you had to have a second plan.
mm, mm. And how can we identify, um, I'm going to put it like this, high functioning burnt out leaders, because I think you can be burnt out for years and you can
Mhm.
still function, deliver, and people may or may not notice. So how would you identify, what would you look for, Melanie, to say, yep, that person is burnt out?
Well, when they're burned out and functioning at a level that's not healthy, you'll
Mm,
find yourself not being your emails are short, your teams are not sound. You're looking at your metrics, you're seeing high turnover, you're seeing low engagement
mm,
with your teams. You're finding your climate surveys might have data that show that your teams don't really aren't really functioning well, and that
mm,
as a leader you have to to some degree own that, right?
mm,
If you find so how you're in communicating, how you're engaging could be a symptom of the fact that you're burned out and tired, and the fact that you haven't taken the time to be sensitive
mm,
to that.
mm,
We have to be sensitive to others as leaders. We don't lead in a vacuum.
mm, mm. And I think, if I come to women in the workplace, I think women do hold more mental and emotional charge in general, and are often running two things in parallel. And you also link imposter syndrome to trauma conditioning, which I would love to explore because people always link imposter syndrome in women. I don't think it's just a female trait.
Absolutely
I think
not.
it's a human reaction to newness. But tell us more about imposter syndrome and its link to trauma conditioning and how that shows up.
Well, so trauma conditioning, trauma can transcend 3 generations.
Mm,
And how does that happen? Well, you might be asking, it's from the fear that our parents may have given us. Well,
mm,
you can never trust your boss. Don't trust your coworkers.
mm,
You always have to be better.
mm,
Um, you should be afraid. I was afraid. This situation happened to me when I was working, and so it's going to happen to you. There are fears, there are belief systems that our parents have given us,
mm,
and they impact how we show up. And then we bring that to work. So maybe you're the first generation in your family to have a leadership position.
mm,
So you feel that you do not belong there because you never saw anyone else in your family rise, and you think you don't belong there.
mm,
That can lead to you feel like you're an imposter,
mm,
which causes you to feel like I got to prove to everyone that I belong here. And
mm.
so the generational beliefs, the historical trauma, trauma is not just a car accident. Trauma, when we talk about trauma informed care, we're talking about lack of parenting, divorce, chronic illnesses,
Mm,
family violence, verbal abuse. And I think I mentioned community
mm,
challenges. It can be bullying now, cyberbullying,
mm,
because now we have generations of workers who have experienced the cyberbullying in high school and throughout college and life. So it makes us feel people feel some kind of way about themselves
mm,
that they must sometimes overcome in their delivery at work.
mm. And so what can we do to help that trauma conditioning? I know you have various reset practices. Could you share with us one of the reset practices? Because I'm understanding that the trauma conditioning also comes from regulating one's nervous system.
Yes, it's how we behave. So I believe that burnout is a choice. I believe absolutely that we have some choice in that.
Mm,
And so my framework says stop it. Just come on. Scan S. Look, listen to your body. Have some truth with yourself. You might not always like the answer, but you've got to confront it.
mm,
Scan. And then you got to tell yourself the truth. Do I like who I see in the mirror in the morning? Do I like how my children
mm,
see me? Do not just work, but what about my life? And then you have to own your yeses, own your nos, and own the fact that you need to transform, and that you're going to take out that calendar in your
mm,
backpack and put yourself on it for time, for clinical support, for whatever you need. And then you have to make yourself a priority, because if you don't, no one else is. My grandmother used to say, if a poor dog don't wag his own tail, nobody's gonna wag it for it.
Boring.
Nobody. And I think that the same is true when it comes to us as leaders. We have to
Mm,
model, because we teach people how to treat us. And
mm,
then we have to be intentional. That means you have to have intentional actions. Don't just say, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to set boundaries. I'm going
mm,
to relook at my life. You have to be intentional about how you are. I'm going to use my employee assistance program. I'm going to get a counselor. I'm going to talk to my pastor. I'm going to cut my work back. I'm going to use my paid time off.
mm.
And then you have to be willing to transform. Be intentional and be willing to transform. You have to be willing to change. And
Mm,
change is not easy. We didn't get in these conditions overnight. And it's going to take some
mm,
time to reframe how we live and what we believe about
mm.
ourselves. But
And
it's worth it.
yeah, and we don't necessarily have the vocabulary or the tools to be able, or the habit to be able to do that, do we? I mean, if I think about particularly organizational life, how do you think, Melanie, that we can design cultures that reward what I'm going to call emotional repair, which is essentially what we're doing. We are looking at how somebody else is showing up and creating a space that, instead of making them feel like they don't belong, will allow them to feel like they belong.
Well, I believe organizations they can do small things
Mm,
like having lunch. We're just gonna shut down, to the degree that you can,
mm,
have scheduled lunch times where
mm,
people say, okay, we're gonna have lunch from 12 to 12:30. Now, you might not have those exact times in every organization, but consider where you can.
mm,
Maybe you could not have meetings after 12 o'clock on Fridays.
mm,
So people can clean off their calendar, clean up their email, and leave for the weekend.
mm, mm,
What if, what if you actually, had hydration stations and you didn't email your leadership team after 5 o'clock
mm,
because you're modeling a culture and behavior? What if we were kind and we had kindness moments and acknowledged everyone just for being there and contributing where they can, because everyone doesn't have the lifestyle or the bandwidth to do extra hours and do all the extras. But
mm,
everybody has value. So I think creating a culture where we're modeling boundaries, we're valuing the human being, the person, and not just the role and the metrics of the organization.
mm. Because talking about metrics, I often talk about psychological safety and what it brings to that environment. And the biggest question is, well, how can we measure it? What do you think regulating the nervous system can bring to psychological safety, and how would you start explaining that to leaders?
Well, I would start telling leaders, that people don't operate well in fear,
Mm,
and they don't operate well in exhaustion.
mm,
And when your nervous system is always on fire and tired, they don't operate out of the best part of their
mm,
brain, the frontal part of their brain. You want people to think well and to react well, and they can't when there's a fearful organization,
mm,
uh, and when people aren't turning off. And let's talk about reset.
mm,
We're not just talking about reset after work. Why do we have meetings back to back to back to back? That's not a healthy culture. People need to be able to go through a meeting, reflect on it, put their
mm,
notes together before they go into the next meeting. And when we're driving them, because now we can do it on Teams, pushing that
mm,
button, we're not getting the reset we used to get when we had to at least
mm,
walk down the hall. And all of that impacts the brain, impacts how well people think, because people can show up and do, doesn't mean you're getting the best of them.
mm, mm. And do you think it's something that leaders should be taught as part of leadership development?
I think that it's part of leadership development, and it's part of, because a leader is still human.
Of
You're not
course.
a leader and
Mm,
then something else on the side.
mm, mm, of course.
Yeah, a leader is a title, but what is your character?
Mm,
What is the level of integrity? What
mm,
is the level of kindness? What is the level of sensitivity? Sensitivity doesn't make you weak. To look at you, Susie, and say, gee, Susie, how are you?
mm,
You don't seem like yourself today. I
mm,
heard that your mother is ill. How are you? That doesn't make you weak. It means that you have vision for the
mm,
people around you. And you have vision for the fact that people are whole beings.
mm. And I think
It's
it,
not just the task at hand. We're not slave drivers whipping,
but
big
it's,
words. Let's go, 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 go.
But it's the second myth, isn't it? So the first myth is this busyness and strong leaders are don't need to sleep and can be busy all the time. The second myth is strong leaders are never vulnerable. And I think particularly with a focus on the human centered part of leadership in the workplace, because AI is going to take over quite a lot of the rest. I think it's really, really important to look at what we can bring there and to actually start breaking down those stories that are now collective stories in the organization, because they keep that myth going, don't they?
Well, we do keep it going. I do believe, to your point, that some organizations and people are afraid of where will AI go?
Mm,
Where is that going to take me? I mean,
mm,
I'm 50 years old and I really want to get 15 more years in to 65, right?
mm,
And they're going to hire someone younger. AI is going to take my position, some of my job. Younger people are going to take out. They want to
mm,
take me out because of younger people because they're less expensive. I don't think that fear is a driver. Is
mm,
it is not healthy. I believe that every leader has to
mm,
consider, what is my plan B? You need to have one. My
mm,
suggestion to people is, rather than live in fear, what can you do to reframe your life?
mm,
Rather than pushing yourself to exhaustion and sickness and illness and frustration,
mm,
go to your plan B,
mm, mm.
because there's no guarantees anymore. I mean,
No.
that's really the other truth, is with AI, the continual transformations across organizations, businesses. You know, I didn't make the cut last
Mm,
year.
mm,
I've been through 5 reorgs in my career. That's
mm.
exhausting.
It
And
is.
and it's exhausting. And I around the third or fourth one, I said, "Oh, I don't know how much more of this I want to do.
Mm,
And if I don't, and there's a possibility that I won't make the next cut, because that's always, as you rise in
of
leadership,
course.
it's
Mm,
always a possibility.
mm.
And I can't network my way out of that possibility. I can't happy hour my way. Oh,
Mm.
let's go to happy hour. I can't relation myself out of that possibility. But
Mm,
I had to have a plan. And I
mm,
did.
mm,
I said, the next round, I see the handwriting on the wall. I'm going to be ready.
mm,
How am I going to shore up some older skills? Do I
mm,
want to go back to the bedside? Do I want to be able to go back to the bedside?
mm.
What can I do? Because it's probably going to come. And I didn't make the next cut.
No. And I think there are more and more reorgs as organizations shift to accommodate what's going on with technology and also with the world in terms of how the markets are shifting and,
Mhm.
the sort of ecosystems that are emerging. But I love the fact that you had a plan B, Melanie. And I'm going to leave our listeners also with that idea of anticipating what may come next. So therefore, detaching myself from this job being my identity to this job being my job. And I am also someone outside of this job, and actually thinking healthily, I think, about what that may mean if I had to look at a plan B, and what that may mean if what I want changes.
Well, and we all have transferable skills. I mean,
Yep.
I would say, I would dare say, 100% of the leaders who are listening have transferable skills
Mm,
from their job and their life experiences that they could package
yep. Yes.
into another form of income or
Mm,
into another career.
mm,
I also tell people, go back to school. You go get a trade.
mm,
I
mm.
mean, go get a trade.
Yep.
And take prepare to be able to do something else. Is that something else going to give you the same title, and span of control?
Mm.
Maybe, maybe
Maybe.
not. And
Mm,
maybe you find you don't need the span of control. You just want to punch in, punch out, do
mm.
a good job, and live your life.
Yeah, I also think that our generation is going to have pre-AI experience, which is also going to be very helpful for the new AI era, because I think, AI is going to bring a lot, is already bringing a lot, but we do need to understand the human part more and also what was good before AI came, because it doesn't automatically mean that it's now wrong.
No, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. But AI is only is a data point, right? It's a
Yeah.
data processor. But you bring the humanity, you bring the
Mm.
joy. And I think focusing on what we bring as human beings to
Yeah.
ourselves and to our teams is what's going to keep us present and viable
Mm.
and help us thrive
Mm.
as we if we want to keep advancing
Yeah.
into our career and into new spaces. And the truth is that new spaces are going to emerge that we don't know what they are yet
Yep.
because of AI. Like this Gen Alpha
Yes.
generation, they're gonna change jobs. I read 16, 17 times,
Oh, at
and they
least.
might have four
Yeah.
to five careers. Can
Mm.
you imagine 4 to 5 careers? But we can't, and the thing is, we can't even tell them what they are yet because we don't know. We know
Yeah.
that you're going to change. We know that
Yeah.
you're going to have new careers, but we don't even know what they are. So,
Mm.
leaders, you have to be flexible and nimble, continue to educate yourself, but do with joy
Yeah. Yeah. And I
and
think,
set yourself up.
yeah. And I
So, if you
think,
don't want to, you
yeah,
don't have to.
you don't have to. But I think regulating emotional regulation and regulating your own nervous system, because organizations are essentially full of nervous systems, the team's nervous system, the individual's nervous system,
Yes.
and therefore the bigger system nervous system. So I think that innately human quality and mastery will allow us to adapt to whatever comes next, I think.
Well, it does. And remember, our nervous systems, we fire, they impact how we think. When
Mm,
your nervous system is always on fire, it affects your immune system, your digestive system,
mm,
your blood pressure, puts you at greater risk for stroke. So, and all of that is costly and expensive.
mm,
And not only is it costly and expensive in terms of healthcare, it impacts the quality of your life.
yeah.
So if you're 40, 50, whatever age, how you show up when you are and live at 60 or 70 is greatly impacted. So you don't want to be on fire. You
No.
want to be healthy because I guarantee you, no one from your job will be there and
Mm,
to help you in that part of your life. So cool down
yeah.
and live well.
Yeah, and be careful what you put in your backpack. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
Melanie, time is running. Would you have a last recommendation for listeners around stepping into valuing who you are and building the leadership that you want?
Yes. I would first of all say that you're a leader regard if you want to be, even if you are supporting PTA or your children's soccer
Mm,
team. There are formal leaders and there are informal leaders. All are valuable.
mm,
So value yourself. Your self-talk and your value for you is more important than what others think. Number one. Number two, stop scrolling, y'all. Stop scrolling and getting your value from social media and your have tos and your shoulda douldas from social media and write down what is important to you.
mm, mm,
Spend some time with you. If you used to like to sing, sing. Go join a choir.
mm,
If there was a time in your life that you would paint and you were artistic, bring that back to the forefront. You work to live. There is joy to be had, but you
mm,
have to choose it. You
mm.
are a gift. You are a gift.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to leave our listeners with that idea of reclaiming their joy and their creativity and doing something with it to fulfill themselves, because you can't pour from an empty cup, can you?
No, you
No.
cannot.
Mm. Melanie, thank you so much for coming and sharing your stories and your insights. Where can people find out more about you and what you do?
Dr. Melanie Gray, theconfidencecoach.com.
Excellent. I'll put that in the show notes so that people can find you easily. Thank you, Melanie, for a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Susie. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a great conversation.